Welcome, everybody. I don't want to be too loud. All right, so here we are for political party review from the beginning to end for APUS history. So even though these are not necessarily political parties, I thought I would start with the debate at the Constitutional Convention or after the ratification. During ratification of the Constitution, there were two, it would be 1787 to 1789. So during the debate, there were two groups of people. One were called the Federalists, and one was called the Anti-Federalists. Now the Federalists supported the Constitution as it was drafted. So because the other group was opposed to it, they didn't have a choice but to call themselves anti-federalists. It doesn't mean that they were anti-federalism. It just means they were against the people who supported the Constitution. They thought something was missing. What did they think was missing? Bill of Rights. They believed that there was not enough protection for people's rights. So the Anti-Federalists wanted additional protections for individual rights. And the compromise was that they secured, passage of the first 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights. Laura, that's not necessarily political parties, but it is groups. It is ideology, and it's good for people to be familiar with that. Do you have any questions on that? Is this going to work, this format? Good. Okay. So now we get to our first president. And depending, we're not going to do John Hanson today, but depending on what textbook you open, it will say George Washington, none, or it will say George Washington, Federalist. And I'm going to explain that to you right now. George Washington, did he himself want there to be political parties? No. In his farewell address, he warned the nation against the formation of political parties. He was opposed to the formation of these. But now, who would be the most important person in his cabinet? Who's the most critical person? Has to be Hamilton. So his Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. It just carries such a greater significance to me now, post-Broadway. I mean, I always loved it, but unbelievable. Now, should I save a review for Hamilton? I'll do that tomorrow. I mean, his whole plan and everything.
Went over him.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of people still don't know it, and I think it's going to come up. So I'll just talk about his specific plan tomorrow. But in terms of what impact that had on political parties, who disagreed with Hamilton? Jefferson. So Jefferson, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, what's that, Connor? Oh, God, no. God, Secretary of State. Sorry. I guess it's these long nights. Secretary of State was critical. Yeah, it's John Kasich dropping out. Was critical of Hamilton. Mostly because of the National Bank. But not only. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to put a little chart in here. Anybody want to help me with how to do that? Oh, okay. Am I, by the way, this is totally not taping.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, it's not.
Oh, no, it is taping. Okay. It's just not there. All right. That would not have been fun.
Does Nebraska and Idaho have a time difference?
To see if they know. All right. So what I'm gonna do, can I insert a little table? Perfect. Okay, so here,
So, Jefferson was.
you guys do, you make me feel like I'm a Luddite, and I'm so advanced technologically.
Oh, the people who basically.
So now, Hamilton and Jefferson are gonna have two really different views on a few issues.
So he didn't like Hamilton because Hamilton supported the creation of a national bank, and that wasn't in the Constitution, which Jefferson wanted to strictly follow the.
Correct.
Okay.
But there's another reason. Jefferson was pro-France. Remember, it was France versus Britain at the time, and Jefferson had a strong allegiance to France, and Hamilton did not. So these are, Laura, your first two political parties. You can call them Hamilton and Jefferson, or you can go by the names of the parties. Hamilton is going to be the Federalists, not the same as the earlier group. Some were, some weren't. But Hamilton, now you could also call them Hamiltonians. It's really rooted in the people. Jefferson, you can call them Jeffersonians, or you can call them Democratic Republicans. So now you're wondering, well, what is it that these people believed in? So if we were to break down each party, for Hamilton, number one, he's in favor of the National Bank. And to do that, he had to have a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Do you understand why? Does the Constitution say that you can create a national bank? Nope. Does it say you can't? No. So he interprets it loosely, whereas Jefferson was opposed to the bank, and he was opposed to the bank largely on his strict interpretation.
But doesn't he get Louisiana and
Which is why people say, number one, he's hypocritical, or number two, he changed his views. Because you're absolutely right. He interpreted the Constitution loosely when he needed to as president. Now, what else would this constitute? If you're in favor of the bank, what type of people would support that institution? The rich. So wealthy, urban, northeast, that's where the Federalists got their support. Rich people, city people, living in the Northeast, New York specifically. Who do you think Democratic Republicans and Jefferson got their support from? Yeah, rural, common man, I don't like to say poor, common man, South and West, agricultural. That would be where the Democratic Republicans would get their support. And this really does form very early, even though obviously Washington was disappointed. And what I was referring to before, pro-Britain versus pro-France, Hamilton was pro-Britain in the foreign policy issue, and Jefferson was pro-France in the foreign policy. He had visited France, he had lived France, he had liked their way of life. He's very influenced by the Enlightenment. That's where a lot of the enlightened thinkers were from. So that's that. So how does that first two-party system make sense to you? You understand it? Feel okay about it? No questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You said Hamilton was like part of the Federalists. You said it's different than the previous.
I just don't want you to think that everybody who was a Federalist during the Constitution had to be in the Federalist Party. Because it's
like
not,
the same beliefs
it could, not necessarily. All this was over up here is whether or not the Constitution should be ratified. So it's really
It's
not,
more specific to the Constitution.
yeah, that's only related to the Constitution. So, everybody's good on that? All right, so now when will political parties rear their head again? It's going to be during the War of 1812. And here's why. During the War of 1812, now, I mean, you don't want like every president, right? You don't need to know that. Okay. During the War of 1812, that's Jefferson, but mostly Madison. They're both Democratic Republicans. So actually, you know what? Let me just backtrack quickly. The Revolution of 1800, that could appear, is when Jefferson defeated Adams. And they call it a revolution because there was a transfer of political parties. So Adams was a Federalist, and now we have our first Democratic Republican.
How was Jefferson around as president during the War of 1812?
He's around during the causes, the build-up, but the Declaration is Madison. Declaration of War is Madison. So I figured we just throw that in there. I can't control myself. So now, the War of 1812, we are on 16 years and counting of Democratic Republican presidents. Jefferson and Madison, both 2 terms. So we're getting to that point. Which party is completely left out? Federalists. So they had a meeting. It's called the Hartford Convention. You know where Hartford is? Connecticut. No, Northeast, where the Federalists have their support. So the Federalists met to discuss.
Is it still part of War of 1812?
Yes, it is. A variety of proposals. Don't stress about the details. They wanted like a 1-term presidency. They thought it should be more difficult to declare war. It's their last effort. They're gone. They disappear. So after this convention is the disappearance of the Federalist Party. Say goodbye. They're never going to be heard from again. Done. Finished. So what time period does that lead to? Era of good feelings. 1816 to 1824 is the era of good feelings when there was one political party. And that will be President James Monroe. Is everybody clear on that? So now, Laura, the question is, how does the 2-party system reemerge? So many people are desperate to answer the Whigs all the time, but I'm not sure if people know when is the right time to answer the Whigs. So it's after. Say that again?
They formed to go against Jackson.
Exactly right. So the election of 1824 is the corrupt bargain. Do I need to go over this again? I've done this so many times. This is when Jackson gets cheated. So because of that, here is the emergence of the second 2-party system. This is the emergence, or you could say the reemergence of a 2-party system, whichever way you want to. So now you're going to have 2 parties again. I mean, I know you guys are a little bit hardcore. If you really are interested, for one brief moment, there was Jackson, who formed the Democrats, and there was John Quincy Adams, who formed what was called the National Republicans. Don't stress about this. It's me getting crazy. It's literally for 4 years. What you should know is...
That's the party you ran on as president?
Yes, in 1828. It's me getting crazy. Sometimes I got to just control myself. I can't help it.
So he was 2 terms, Quincy Adams?
No, he lost in 1828. He ran for 2 terms, but he
Oh,
lost.
so the second time he ran, it was as the
It
national.
was exactly. So now here's your second 2-party system. They will be called the Democrats and the Whigs. Now, Who will be the best representative for the Democrats? Andrew Jackson. Who will be the best representative for the Whigs? Henry Clay. All right?
Is this before or after Jackson was elected?
This is
Or,
after 1832.
okay.
So he's elected in 1828 as a Democrat. Whigs form 1832. Henry Clay will be the first Whig candidate for president. Now, I think this is going to help you. We're just going to write down that the platform for the Whigs was similar to the Federalists. We're not going to say exactly the same, but we're going to say similar. So let's first talk about Jackson and the Democrats. He is another common man president. Definitely more of the common man president. Now, this is difficult. I can't say exclusively that he's for states' rights. He's for federal rights. I can't do that. It's difficult. I think Jackson, because he contradicts himself. So the Democrats, for the most part, I'm going to say, for the most part, preferred states' rights. But not when South Carolina wanted to do what? There you go. But not when South Carolina wanted to nullify the tariff. So I can't give you an absolute. It's just not that clear.
What was the tariff?
When a tax on foreign goods that the South called the tariff of abominations.
Yeah.
Okay? Henry Clay and the Whigs are very big supporters of the National Bank. They're very big supporters of the tariff. Very big supporters of internal improvements. What's that? Like the American system. That's all building up our infrastructure. But that's national, right? So the Whigs were, and Laura, I hope this helps, a more national agenda, a more national platform. I don't know, who, our railroads could use some work. Who do you think should pay for it? Should the states pay for it, or should the federal government pay for it?
Wait, why did it say American national agenda?
I'm rambling. They have more of like a national agenda platform, meaning they want to look at the country as a whole and not as individual states taking care of things. Now, does Jackson like the bank?
No.
No, Jackson's opposed to the bank. But he is a contradiction, so I wish I can give you, and by the way, 7th period today we did a Jackson review. It's about 15 minutes. I just have to post it when I get home.
Confusing Jefferson and Jackson.
Okay, well, those are two good people to confuse because they're both common man presidents. So at least you're not confusing two people that are different. Okay? I could go more, but I think that's more than enough for that. Is everybody good on that? Okay. Now, the next thing I would say would be the election of 1860. Well, that's not what I wanted. How do I get from...
Almost on the same page.
There I go? Okay. So now the election of 1860 is the first Republican president. And who's that? Abraham Lincoln. So now we go from Whigs and Democrats to Republicans and Democrats.
So would Whigs and Republicans have the same values?
Similar, yes. Abraham Lincoln's political idol was Henry Clay. That's who he looked up to. Lincoln absolutely looked up to him.
From here on, it's basically just
So now from here on, it's Democrat, Republican, but
They switch.
there's changes. When Nicole says they switch, I get nervous with that because it's not a clear switch.
Not like completely.
Right. And you guys are living through, we're all living through a shift as well right now. Before I met with you guys, I just read an article about a Republican who said that he's changing his registration to the Conservative Party and says, I will not support Trump. And you're going to see a lot of Republicans do that. So we're living through a shift right now. It's major. It's major. It just takes time for it to happen. So Lincoln is a Republican. So what I think you should know is really more about Reconstruction. And during Reconstruction, the group that wanted to punish the Confederates and Confederate state governments was the radical Republicans. Good. So the radical Republicans want to punish them severely. Excellent. So what does that make the Democrats? Who were they? No. They were moderate Republicans who were lenient. The Democrats were the Southern racist politicians. The former Confederates. That's who they were. So at this time, the Southern Democrats are the ones that are trying to institute what laws? Jim Crow, black codes, poll tax, literacy test. Those were all Southern Democrats who were doing this.
So Jim Crow laws and black codes around the same time?
Black codes happened first. Jim Crow is an example of a black code. That doesn't happen until like 1880. Black codes are pretty much right after the Civil War. Okay?
These are all after the Civil War.
Everything, right. This is all after. Okay? So this is working. Everybody's clear? So now we are.
Is at the time like the Civil War is still ending?
Civil War ends in 1865. And then pretty much the black codes probably start a few years after that. Was that your question?
No, I meant the time of the election, so it's like prior to.
Which election?
When, 1861.
That's the beginning of the Civil War.
Right.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the
What
Civil
year
War.
did the Civil War start?
1861. Happens right away. Happened right. All right. So now, what's the matter? You talking about something else?
No, like, the AP test, like, should they eventually, like, run out of questions?
No, because they pay people to make them. Yeah,
I mean,
so.
Like,
And remember,
there
it's-
was the Civil War, like, this is the year what happened, like things like that.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're in the Gilded Age. And why do political parties not really matter?
Good time.
1865 to 1900. Why do political parties really not matter?
Sorry, well, I don't really have an answer to that, but I just have a question.
Okay,
So, Lincoln was kind of seen as like the leader of the Republicans at
Right.
the time. Who was seen as the leader of the Democrats?
probably Stephen Douglas.
Okay.
Yeah, Stephen Douglas. I think I can't think John C. Breckinridge was that big of a deal. I think Stephen Douglas. Remember the Lincoln Douglas debates?
Yep.
Okay.
So Douglas was like openly racist.
See, no, that's what I meant. Is that he's from? No, that's Frederick Douglass. Stephen Douglas was from Illinois.
I was reading that
And
last night.
that's what- Nicole, what happens is the Democratic Party, they have a division at their convention. So the Northern Democrats support Stephen Douglas, the Southern Democrats support John C. Breckinridge.
Who was it that, like, recognized that they wouldn't get votes if they, like, were openly racist?
Okay, that's way later, so just hold off. Yeah. So what I was going to say here is that both the Democrats and the Republicans were supporting big business. Okay? It doesn't matter. And back to Lincoln, by the way, for a second, Emma. The Republican platform, that was a free soil party. They were not abolitionists. They were people that are against the extension of slavery.
Wait, was Lincoln
he
No,
got killed.
right,
Oh,
yeah,
damn.
so, all right. So both the Democrats and the Republicans support big business during this time. That's why, Jenna, a third party forms. So the third party that forms
That was
is the
against
Populist
big
Party.
business.
Populist Party formed as a coalition of farmers and workers. Now, this is not the first time that a third party formed. It's probably the most significant third party, okay? If you want me to go back in time, during the 1850s, the Know Nothing Party formed as a third party as well. You know what their stance was? Very good, anti-immigrant. So, I shouldn't put exclamation points. Anti-immigrant. So, it's not like there wasn't a third party, but Jenna, this one had more of an impact than any other third party in history. So the Populist Party, also sometimes called the People's Party.
Oh, this is the progressive stuff that we used in class.
Right. So the Populist Party platform is 8-hour workday. Because remember, it's farmers and workers. They were in favor of restricting immigration. Because what were immigrants doing? Taking their jobs. They were in favor of a one-term presidency. Give them more of a chance to win. They were in favor of government ownership of the railroads, the telegraph, telephone. Very,
Is this direct election of senators?
yes, they were in favor of a direct election of senators.
Why would they want the government to own their
Because the populists felt as if that the political parties were not addressing any of their needs and that the businesses had too much control. So they'd rather the government run it so that it would be looking out for the interests of the people. I mean, they're borderline socialist at this time. They wanted a graduated income tax. They want the people to have more political power. So recall, referendum, initiative. So recall is when the people can actually vote somebody out of office. People can say, we want even before the term is up. And referendum is when the people vote on a law. Members of New York State, would you like marijuana to be legal? So, this is all part of the Populist Party platform. Now, of course, the most important is the addition of silver into the currency. The populists desperately want silver added to the currency.
When was the Free Soil Party?
Free Soil Party is before the Civil War also,
Oh, that was when like everyone would be.
and that's when they thought any new territory should be free. They're not abolitionists.
No, they just thought all the.
They just thought the new one should be free.
Was that him?
Who?
David Wallace?
Oh, Wilmot, David Wilmot, yes. Okay. So now, hi, no, it's okay. So now, in 1896, a Democrat, William Jennings Bryan, gave a speech called The Cross of Gold. He argued that we should back up money with gold and silver. So when the populists heard this, they had a choice to make. Should they run their own candidate, or should they support others? And they went with him. So did the populists ever get elected president? No. But they did have an impact, because if you look at all these items, they played a major role, and what we'll say is the populist party set the stage for the progressive era.
Didn't also like some of their demands become amendments?
Yes, as well, absolutely.
So they formed during the Gilded Age with the, like supporting big business.
Yeah,
Then they kind of became prominent with the populists in the next.
yeah, the only thing you said wrong there is they didn't support big business, support the regulation of big business.
The Gilded Age or the?
Oh, the populists.
They-
oh.
Wait,
I hope I didn't write that.
wait, the populists
Wanted business to be regulated.
and then the Gilded Age was the big business.
Gilded Age supported big business. Oh, yeah. Is that what you
They're,
said?
like, completely separate then.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So did the populist party kind of form as a result of the Gilded Age?
Absolutely. Populist Party formed, absolutely. And also because of just all the problems farmers were having. You know, the drought and the insects and the debt, the high shipping rates, the high interest rates. You know, it wasn't a good time for them. All right, you good on this? So, in 1912, Theodore Roosevelt will run for president on the Bull Moose Party ticket. What's another way of saying that? Progressive. He was a progressive. So anything more government regulation, more government involvement would be him. Yeah,
I have a question. So back then, were Republicans for the regulation of business or not? Because Teddy Roosevelt, like the first time he was president, he like made all the progressive reforms, but he was a Republican. So it's like.
okay,
was it
here's the
different, or
best,
did he just not care?
here's the best way I can describe it. During the Gilded Age, both Republicans and Democrats favored laissez-faire. During the Progressive era, both Republicans and Democrats favored more government involvement.
Okay.
So is that
Does
kinda-
that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that kind of saying that when he ran the Bull Moose Party, he was kind of like running on the progressive?
It's exactly what he was doing.
Not the progressive, sorry, I meant to say the populist party.
But the populist party's gone, so
It's
forget
kind of
that.
the same kind of-
Yeah, same thing, yeah. But I'm not sure if he would support all those things. All right, are we good?
So this was after he was already president,
Right, so he won 2 terms.
and then he wanted to,
Then he left, went to Africa, Taft became president,
yeah.
and then he came back, but he lost a 3rd term, okay? So now we're gonna go to the 1920s, and we're gonna know Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover are your 3 presidents, all Republicans who supported tax cuts and laissez-faire approach. So during the 20s, we have Republican presidents. They all support tax cuts and laissez-faire approach.
But Teddy Roosevelt came back in 1912, right?
Right, but he didn't win.
Yeah.
Wilson won.
Okay.
All right? Everybody good on that? Okay, almost in the home stretch. So now, can I go to the next slide? No? Okay, so all those Republican presidents who enjoyed popularity during the 20s ended when the stock market crashed on October 29, 1929. So Hoover obviously is not reelected, and now we get to FDR, Democrat, who was elected 4 times. So I'm going to do the best I can here for you to understand this. FDR was very popular. Now, does it mean everybody liked him? No, but he sure was popular enough to get 60% of the votes some of the time. So he's a Democrat, but you guys know this. Is FDR a racist?
No.
No. Is FDR going to support like black codes and Jim Crow laws? No. But people don't make the shift right away. People don't understand that I've always voted Democrat. My parents always voted Democrat. I'm in the KKK. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm in the KKK. So what do? You vote Democrat. They don't realize it. So now the Democrats are kicking butt. And now you get to 1948,
When did he first become president?
32, 36, 40, and 44. But he dies in the fourth term. So now Truman takes over, and in 1948, Truman, Democrat, defeated Thomas Dewey, Republican. But, Laura, there was a third candidate. And the third candidate was Strom Thurmond, who ran on the Dixiecrat ticket. And the Dixiecrat ticket can also be called a states' rights party. Right. What do you think their platform supported? Segregation.
Is he the one who said like segregation?
He is not. That was George Wallace. Yeah.
And what did George Wallace run
As George Wallace ran
as? And when?
1968 as a.
He basically like
He was a Democrat. So you asked about George Wallace, Emma.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was a Democrat. But this guy, Strom Thurmond, was also a Democrat, but then changes later on, which we're going to get to in a second. So that's just one party. Don't forget that this was the election where the Chicago Tribune published a headline, Dewey defeats Truman, which did not happen. Okay? So now, in 1952 and 1956, Eisenhower was elected as a Republican, but he was very moderate. He wasn't like a hardcore, ultra conservative. The Democrats actually wanted him to run on their ticket as well. So he's a very moderate guy.
Could you run two parties?
Not at the same time, of course, but you can, not two new opposing parties, but. Now in 1960, you have JFK, who's a Democrat. And then in 1964, you have LBJ, who's a Democrat. So I want you to do the math. 1932, 1936, 1940, 1944, 1948. Even 52 and 56 were moderate. 60, 64. The Republicans feel like they've had 9 presidential elections in a row where they really haven't won. If you want to be accurate, you could say 7 out of 9. But Eisenhower, for example, integrated Little Rock High School. That was a more liberal thing to do. Got it? So the Republicans say we need to get that Southern vote. And this becomes the Southern strategy. It's an attempt by the Republican Party to regain the Southern vote. Now, what do you think Southerners in the 1960s were like? White and racist. Do you think you can run on a platform like George Wallace, Emma, and say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and win on the national level?
On the national level, where Donald Trump is doing it.
Oh, Emma, I called in the wrong person. Okay, you can't win by saying don't let those N words into our school. You just can't do it. You can't say don't let black people on the same, but you just can't do it. But what you can do is say you support states' rights. You're coding it.
Wasn't it a fail?
What's that?
Didn't fail?
No, because because since that time, Republicans have dominated the South.
What
The-
year was this?
So that was 1968. So in 1968, Nixon won as a Republican. Do you all understand the Southern strategy?
So you ran on a states' right.
Right. You use states' rights as the platform.
All right.
But I'm always cautious because today, if you support states' rights, it does not mean that you're a racist. But back then, it probably did.
Okay.
And since this time, Liz, the Republicans have pretty much dominated the South, except for 2 times where Democrats won a couple. Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton. But you want to know why? They're from the South. Jimmy Carter was from Georgia. Bill Clinton was from Arkansas. Other than that, they call it the Solid South. That's a good thing to know. They call it the Solid South, Republican dominated. So, off the top of my head, Laura, I think that's the best I could do.
So, is that like kind of now aligned with today's Republican Democrats?
Yeah.
That's when it started to align because of
Yes, that's...
Republicans are not the racist ones, you know what I mean?
No, but they're the states' rights party because they're the limited government. Yeah, the Republicans today absolutely believe that the federal government shouldn't control health care. The states should. The Republican Party today absolutely believes that taxes should be lowered. Let states pay for everything. So it absolutely is still consistent with today.
And prior to that, it was the Democrats who wanted the states' rights?
Yes.
Okay.
So for the states' rights, how would, like, for the Southern strategy, I mean, how would states' rights, like, constitute, like...
Because when you're living in Alabama and you think of, so here's what the federal government was doing. Civil Rights Act of 1964. Voting Rights Act of 1965. 24th Amendment abolished poll tax. I'll go out of order. Little Rock Central High School. This is all examples of the federal government getting in the way of the states. This is all the Voting Rights Act of 1965 said the federal government could go down to your state and make sure you run the elections the right way or they're going to run them themselves. Civil Rights Act of 1964 said there is no discrimination allowed anywhere in the country. Little Rock High School, they called in federal troops, the National Guard, to overrule the governor. So if I'm speaking as a Southerner, who's the federal government to say what I can do down here? Remember, American by birth, Southern by the grace of God. So that's their mentality. Not even a laugh, jeez. All right, not me. Everybody's going to think I'm teaching from, like, Mississippi. So, does that help, Laura, for the political parties? Are you sure?
No, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, then I'm going to hit stop.